Mr. President.
The senator from Massachusetts.
Mr. President, American families are struggling to pay for groceries and rent. Federal workers are missing paychecks. Americans across the country are watching as their health insurance premiums skyrocket. But what is President Donald Trump focused on? He just pardoned a convicted crypto billionaire who helped the Trump family get even richer. Changpeng Zhao, known as CZ, founded Binance, a giant crypto exchange that became a home for terrorists, child abusers, and other criminals. Both Republican and Democratic policymakers have been ringing the alarm on Binance for years. 2 years ago, several of my Republican colleagues warned that this crypto platform was facilitating, quote, significant illicit finance activity, close quote, and that it could be, quote, be providing material support to entities engaged in terrorism under federal law or being willfully blind to the fact that it may be doing so. Another one of my Republican colleagues warned that CZ was misleading the public about Binance's operations in China. Republicans and Democrats were right to be worried. Binance facilitated financing for terrorist organizations like ISIS, Hamas, and Al-Qaeda. It opened the spigot for Iran. Binance made it easier to finance child sexual abuse. One Binance employee even wrote that they needed a banner that said, quote, is washing drug money too hard these days? Come to Binance. We got cake for you. Binance put its profits ahead of following the law and ahead of America's national security. This was criminal activity. Binance pleaded guilty to multiple criminal charges and was required to pay a penalty of more than $4 billion. CZ pleaded guilty to criminal charges and went to prison for willfully failing to maintain an effective money laundering program that could have prevented financing these terrorists and drug traffickers. Oh, but CZ got a lucky break. A month after he was released from prison, Donald Trump was elected president, and CZ had bet on the right horse. Remember, CZ is still the biggest shareholder in Binance. And right before the election, Binance reportedly offered to strike a crypto business deal with the Trump family. When Trump launched his own crypto venture, Binance allegedly wrote the code. And now all of this is paying off big time for CZ, Binance, and the Trump family. In May, a United Arab Emirates investment firm used the Trump family's stablecoin to buy a $2 billion stake in Binance. And President Trump and his family will make millions of dollars in fees and interest off just that one deal. In the middle of all this, CZ applies for a pardon. And last Friday, Donald Trump gave it to him. When asked about his pardon of CZ, the president said that, quote, a lot of people say he wasn't guilty of anything. But one of my Republican colleagues rightly said, quote, he was convicted, he is not innocent. Once again, President Trump has shown the American people that he is willing to turn a blind eye to money flowing to terrorists and child abusers so long as it lines his own pockets. Pardoning convicted crypto billionaires sends a message. If you have money and the right connections, you don't have to follow the law. You get a special deal after you've broken the law. Congress needs to stop this kind of corruption. Today, we can send a message that President Trump's pardon is wrong. We also have an opportunity to head off more corruption as Congress considers crypto market structure legislation. If Senate Republicans don't let us fix this, then the Senate Republicans own this corruption and lawlessness. Mr. President, I yield the floor to my colleague.
Mr. President.
The senator from California.
Mr. President, I rise today in support of Senator Warren's resolution condemning President Trump's decision to pardon Changpeng Zhao. Last week, President Trump once again put his wealthy allies, family members, and business partners ahead of the public trust when he granted a pardon to the founder of Binance. In 2023, Mr. Zhao was sentenced to prison after his company pleaded guilty to serious crimes, including failing to prevent money laundering and letting billions of dollars flow through Binance to sanctioned regimes and criminals to facilitate child sex abuse and drug trafficking and terrorism. At the time, the Treasury Department estimated that Binance had allowed over 1.5 million currency trades that violated American sanctions, including hundreds of millions of dollars that shirked sanctions against Iran, against Syria, against Cuba, and against Russia. For these crimes, Binance paid one of the largest fines in U.S. history, $4.3 billion in fines. And yet, after serving only a fraction of his sentence, President Trump stepped in to grant Zhao a pardon and wipe his slate clean. Why? Why do such a thing? Because Mr. Zhao is part of a wide web of financial interests tied to the president and his allies. That's why, including a crypto venture that poured billions into Binance. The president's pardon came after a stablecoin from World Liberty Financial, the Trump family crypto venture, was used to purchase a $2 billion stake in Binance, marking the most significant use to date of that Trump family stablecoin, and once again increasing the value of the Trump family holdings. That's not the use of a pardon to correct an injustice. That's the use of a pardon to commit an injustice. That's corruption of the most blatant kind. And it's illustrative of the same message Donald Trump continues to send donors and friends. If you've got enough money or the right political connections, the law simply doesn't apply to you. The president isn't using the power of his office to ensure hungry families have access to food next month. He's not using the power of his office to make sure that Americans can afford to pay for their health care. He's using the power of his office to pardon a convicted billionaire and one who just happens to be doing business with the Trump family crypto platform, World Liberty Financial. We have seen this story before, and this is just the latest example of the president's abuse of the pardon power as a means of rewarding wealthy donors, family members, allies, and benefiting himself personally. We saw it when Trump pardoned corporate executives convicted of bribery and campaign finance crimes as a thank you for donating millions to his campaign. We saw it in his first term when he pardoned operatives like Roger Stone, Paul Manafort, and Steve Bannon, who helped him or his allies evade accountability. And we saw it when he issued sweeping unconditional pardons for 1,500 individuals involved in the January 6th attack on this Capitol, including many who were convicted of violent crimes, violent acts against law enforcement. In fact, the president even stacked the office's task with reviewing pardon applications with his allies, installing Ed Martin as pardon attorney at the Justice Department after his failed nomination to be U.S. Attorney for D.C. In case after case after case, the message has been clear. Loyalty to Donald Trump is more important than the rule of law. It is more important than anything in the public interest. This is not what the framers intended when they gave the president the authority to grant clemency. And they certainly never envisioned it as a get-out-of-jail-free card for political allies, campaign donors, and business partners. But this administration has turned the pardon power into a tool for corruption and self-dealing, which is why Senator Warren and I have introduced this resolution to shine a light on the rampant corruption of this administration and to hold those responsible accountable. I urge my colleagues to join us in sending a clear, bipartisan message that the U.S. government should act in the public interest, not the financial interest of the president, and that the pardon power must not be for sale. And with that, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Judiciary be discharged from further consideration, and the Senate now proceed to S-Res 466. Further, I ask unanimous consent that the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and that the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Is there an objection?
Mr. President,
The senator from Wyoming.
reserving the right to object. Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1 of the United States Constitution gives the President complete discretion to issue executive clemency. In Ex parte Garland in 1866, the Supreme Court even said that the President has, quote, unlimited powers in respect to pardons, extending to every offense under the law, unquote. Congress must be mindful of its proper role as part of our constitutional separation of powers, and for those constitutional reasons alone, I cannot support this resolution. With respect to Binance in particular, and the individual who was the subject of this pardon specifically, I continue to have concerns with their past activity that may have facilitated illicit finance. In October 2023, House Financial Services Committee Chairman French Hill and I wrote a letter to the Department of Justice urging that prosecutors take a close look at whether Binance was willfully blind to bad actors using their digital asset exchange for illicit purposes, and whether Binance may have facilitated fundraising related to the October 7th attacks on Israel. I continue to stand by my letter today. This is why I'm working day and night on bipartisan digital asset market structure legislation, which will ensure that common sense illicit finance rules apply to digital asset exchanges, and that bad actors that use digital assets are rooted out. There is a renewed sense of optimism and energy around market structure talks today, and I am hopeful that we will have legislation on the Senate floor before the end of this year. And I want to make one final note, Mr. President. The hypocrisy that is patently obvious here. Where was the outrage from my colleagues when President Biden brazenly pardoned his own son for crimes he absolutely committed? And don't forget, President Biden repeatedly told the American people before an election that he would not use his constitutional pardon power to pardon his son. That hypocrisy is staggering. The American people delivered a decisive mandate for President Trump, and that includes his constitutional authority to issue pardons. Democrats need to accept the election results and stop their partisan theatrics every time this president exercises his legitimate powers. For these reasons, Mr. President, I object.
The objection is heard.
President,
The senator from Massachusetts.
Mr. President, I noticed that the senator rightly points out that the president has the power to pardon. There is nothing in our proposed resolution that tries to take that away from the president. We understand that. But we do think it's time for Congress to use its voice, for this United States Senate to stand up and say pardoning a convicted criminal who has facilitated child trafficking, who has facilitated drug trafficking, who has facilitated terrorism around the world is a really bad idea. And that's what this resolution is all about. So I understand that the senator has concerns, but those concerns could be registered by the Republicans by simply signing on to a resolution that says we do not believe it is right to pardon someone under these circumstances. I'm glad to hear that the senator is working on a market structure bill that will presumably avert this kind of problem and deal with the corruption of the Trump family as it relates to cryptocurrency. So I look forward to seeing that and just can't wait to see what the provisions are that stop Donald Trump from this kind of self-dealing and from what appears to be bribery right out in the open for the entire world to see. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
The senator from California.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to join in raising a few points in response to our colleague. First, the pardon power is not absolute. If the pardon power were absolute, a president could order vast branches of the U.S. government to break infinite number of laws and then simply pardon all of the offenders. The Constitution is not interpreted as a matter of constitutional law so as to negate whole other sections of the Constitution. If it were absolute, it would negate whole other sections of the Constitution. It is not absolute. But we are not contesting whether the president has the power to grant this particular pardon. What we are contesting is the morality of doing it. What we are contesting is whether we should sit blindly while the pardon is used in such a corrupt fashion to reward friends and allies and to enrich the president's family. The fact that he may have the power to do it doesn't make it right to do, and the fact that he may have the power to do it doesn't prevent us from condemning it. And by the way, vis-a-vis President Biden, I did condemn the use of his pardon, but that certainly does not justify the use of the pardon here. It simply cannot be, should not be the case that a president gives a pardon to a convicted criminal who has helped launder money to avoid sanctions on our adversaries, and that we simply shrug and say, he has the power to do it, and we shall not condemn it. We should condemn it. And the absence of condemnation, I think, will only be an encouragement for the president to continue abusing the pardon power. I urge support for the resolution, and I thank the senator from Massachusetts for offering it. And I yield back.
Mr. President,
The senator from Wyoming.
I renew my objection as someone who was spied on by the Biden Justice Department, one of 8 senators to be spied on, in violation of the separation of powers. I respect the separation of powers. And in this case, the separation of powers protects the President of the United States' pardon power. We need to protect it as well. For those reasons, I further object, Mr. President. Thank you.